Hello, this is Professor John Wagoner, and this is my video regarding course materials for Painting 1. First off, I want to discuss the suggested vendors. A lot of students like to use these three listed local vendors, especially Michaels and Hobby Lobby, as they offer coupons every week and they can be found on their websites. So for example, they'll have 40% off one item and things of that nature. I've given you the links here and as well as the course in Canvas with that information listed along with some Google Maps to those locations. There's also CC Hardman's, it's a local art store. Ralph will actually have most supplies, but may not have everything. If they do have a student discount available, you can take up that offer. The other vendors that are suggested are ones that I personally use. So there's Utrecht, Dick Blick, and Jerry's Artorama. Some of them include free shipping and things of that nature, but you can check that out. There are also other vendors you can use. I know some students just flat out do, Walmart or Amazon and things of that nature. But if you have any questions about any of the materials after viewing this and the list and the course syllabus, please feel free to reach out. So let's start off with the required items to purchase. So the first item here is Vine charcoal or charcoal pencil. Soft or medium is preferred. You'll also see these listed as willow or vine as the image in the far left illustrates. Do not get hard or compressed charcoal. So when you're sketching on your canvas, if you used the hard or compressed or even a graphite pencil, that will show through on the paint when you paint over it. So it'll give this ghost image and you can't really erase it. You'll have to keep covering it with paint and it'll still show through. So again, take note of that. Instead of the stick format, they will have it in a pencil, so you can shave it down and things like that. That's up to you. Either format's fine. Number 2 pencil with eraser, that's mostly just for taking notes and things like that, or sketching your basic ideas in a sketchbook if you get that optional item. And then the Sharpie and black marker or black marker, that's for your color theory notebook so that when you're writing out your labels on those forms, we can see them clearly in the photos. A ruler or a straight edge. I forgot to also mention, these are the items that you'll need to obtain by the second week. These are the items that you'll see in the use of the color theory notebook. So the ruler and straight edge, you guys are going to basically create different projects, experimenting with your paints, learning a little bit of control and basic color theory. Plastic palette paint tray, you'll need this because that's what you're going to be putting your paints on and controlling them and mixing them as well. So I prefer plastic since we're using acrylic. There's different types and shapes and styles of palettes. You can see here this little kidney shaped one with all the little wells and mixing areas in here, and you can put your thumb in there and hold it, and it's kind of portable. It's easier than just putting your paints on a tray on a table and then going back and forth, and it can cause some strain, whether on your neck, hands, things like that. But for an artist, long term, that's what we need to think about. Then there's these individual wells that you can see, and then the mixing area in the middle. Those are nice because they have a little lid that you can put over it to prevent it from drying out so fast, because acrylics do dry out very fast. When you do use paint, you want to use a little bit in each one, depending on the colors you use. You don't want to just put out the whole rainbow, and I'll be discussing that at a later time. But that's a really nice standard one that students can use because you can mix all these different colors in the subsiding wells off to the side. One of the things that I actually prefer is just a cheap, metal baking pan. It can come in different shapes and sizes, but with this, I can mix all of it within this area. It's fairly cheap and inexpensive. I generally prefer using these than anything else, but again, to each their own in their painting style. If you use like the really cheap, bendable, flexible aluminum foil pans, they will not really stay held up as well as the others because they tend to tear and break, and then you'll leak paint all over the place. You'll also see here paper towels or shop rag. This is mostly for cleaning your brushes or maybe your palettes as well. because you'll be using a lot of those, and I'll show you some tricks in my painting videos later on this semester on how to use some paper towels to erase off of a canvas. Lastly, on this slide, a bottle cap or a quarter or a circle template. In your color theory notebook, you'll be painting a lot of circles, so it's nice to have these circles drawn out in pencil, and then you can trace it over with your Sharpie, and it's nice to have that control with your brush and practice with that. But you will need some sort of shape or form to draw out circles. You'll be using a lot of those in that ruler or straight edge. So talking about palettes again, this PDF will be available in the course in Canvas, so you can read this at your leisure. But there's different shapes and styles and uses for it. But the main one that I'm going to talk about here are the plastic palettes. And if you can find a white palette, that's better, because you always want your palette to match the color of your canvas. We do see in oil painting, a lot of people use the wood or kidney-shaped palettes over here to the sides. And that's really because you scrape off that paint and it won't react with the plastic that's on that material. Next, we have canvas pads or canvas paper or acrylic paper. They're called different things, but the majority of them are canvas pads. These are sheets of canvas or paper that can withhold acrylic paint on the surface. So these are just 3 different brands. Some you can get at Walmart, Hobby Lobby, and Michaels. They're all pretty much the same item. It doesn't really make a difference on the type here, except that it needs to be able to take acrylic paints. The size, though, I want no smaller than a sheet of regular computer paper, so that, 8 by 10, nothing smaller than that. So these are perfect for your color theory notebooks. Also, make sure to take note for the Fredericks brand. Sometimes, in the inventory process, they mix them up and it'll say black canvas pad. So don't buy the black ones. You want to make sure it's just the regular ones that look like this, and it won't have the word like black canvas pad. So brushes. You can get an assortment of brushes. I want you to think of big and small and a variety of sizes and styles. So for your brushes, there's 2 main categories. The first are synthetics, which are really smooth, very natural. They come in different colors. And make sure when you're looking at brushes that they say that they're for acrylic paints. If you've been oil painting and you're thinking, oh, well, I can use those same brushes, you actually cannot. They mix with the materials and the chemicals on the surface. The paint and the bristles will start to break down. So make sure you've got a completely different set. If you had painted in oils before and now you're switching to acrylics, get a whole new set of brushes. So synthetics over here off to the left. And then what we call natural, they have a lot of rough texture. You can see by the grain of the bristles the difference here. And then a lot of people call natural bristles just a hog brush or a bristle brush. If you want to be very painterly, like some of the masters, Van Gogh, very impasto or painterly in appearance, you want to go with those natural brushes. If you're more of an illustrator and you like that flat style, you can go with synthetics. A lot of students, they'll start off with one particular type and then they'll switch because they didn't like the one that they chose. That's absolutely fine. Or you can, get a mixture of brushes. Some stores like Michaels or Hobby Lobby, they sell them individually. Even online vendors, they, sell brushes, individually as well. And you can mix it up. But if you do go into a physical store and you're able to, like, say, go to Hobby Lobby or Michaels and you can touch the brushes, you can feel the bristles and you can feel how smooth the synthetics are versus the natural. And you can get an idea of, how that texture would be on the surface. So again, talking about brushes, you're going to see a couple of things here, and I'll be talking about this later on in my basic painting videos later on this semester. So there's different types, and those are going to be the shapes, which you see with these fibers, and they're all held in with a metal ferrule, and then that's actually attached or glued onto a handle. And sometimes those will break off, and I'll show you ways to, a quick fix on that as well. So in this class, there's specific types of these paintbrushes that I want you to look at here. And there are so many different types, but really you just need some of the basics. So the first one we have here, a lot of people call them pencils or round brushes. Again, they kind of mimic that shape of a pencil. It's very traditional. A lot of people use it for oil painting, just for details and lines. They actually come in smaller sizes. You can see the colors of the bristle fibers. They're made of different materials. So whether you have synthetics and then sort of these bristles and different colors as well. So again, it's up to you. They even make some ergonomic brushes. They have like a little silicone handle. If that's, maybe an issue for you, arthritis, things like that, you can do that. The next one are flats, and it's just like a little flat top here in the section. And you want to always think a big and a little of each. So like these rounds right here, there's 4 of them. You don't have to buy all 4. You could just get a big and a small. And later on, you might find out, hey, I need another brush. Or you say, nope, this is it. I'm good with these. That's totally fine. But with your flats, I recommend getting a nice, large, flat brush, because when you go to paint in backgrounds and things, you don't want to use your largest flat, which is, maybe not even half an inch wide. It's going to take you much longer than using a very large brush. So rounds are good for circles, curves, and details. These flats over here, they're nice for clean edge marks, squares, anything with a hard line. Those are perfect. Brights, as you see here in category 3, they're just like flats. They're shorter. It's a lot easier to control, but it doesn't hold a lot of paint. So you're always going back and trying to refill that brush, loading it with paint. But it is kind of hard to clean. You can take care of your brushes every once in a while, leave them in a little cup of water while you're painting, and it'll stay nice and wet and it won't dry out. But that is a problem that students have. Remember, keeping your brushes wet, and then once you're done with them, washing them out with soap. And I'll show you how to do that later on as well. But really take care of your brushes. Other types that we see here are filberts. Here we can see the shape of that filbert. It kind of looks like a flat, on a side view, but it has this little U shape. And over time, depending on how you use it, you can really get it down to this nub. And it's almost like that's a bright filbert. And so there's a lot of different mixtures and things there. But these are actually really nice brushes. They help with curves again. If you want nice looking brush strokes and being very painterly, filberts are a good way to start. There's also the length of the handles. Don't worry about those. You're really looking at the type of bristles that you want. Again, it's all about the basic style and how you're going to hold it. There are some other brushes listed here, such as designer brushes, riggers, blending or fan brush, a decorator's brush, or chip brush. You may have seen that, like if you ever painted the wall in your house or anything else like that. It's very industrial, but again, they're very large and they're very nice to have. They're super cheap. You can go to Walmart or any store like that, and they're less than $1. They come in different sizes and styles. For fan brushes, if you want to learn how to blend a little bit smoother and softer with your paints, you can always use these. They tend to make them very cheap nowadays. They're not as good as they used to be. So I'll actually teach you how to blend with the other brushes as well, but I'll also have some supplemental information on that. Riggers here that you can see in 6, they're very thin. They can give you really nice detailed lines, but you can find some round brushes that are just as small. So again, to recap on the brushes, you can really think at least this minimum, getting 2 flats. So you can think large and a small. For your rounds, a large and a small. And some of them may not come to the tip of being so sharp like a pencil. It may actually be a little bit more rounded out and kind of flat on the bottom, and that's fine too. If you feel like, hey, I want to try this out, you can get that brush. Then the filberts, again, a large and a small, and then that sort of that decorator brush. So that'll help you with really large canvases and large areas that you'll need to paint in. So in the basic necessities, I would say flats, rounds, and filberts. Any additional brushes, that's all up to you. I highly recommend that large brush, but you don't have to get it. So for canvases, you can get what's called a stretched canvas. It's the actual fabric, that linen that is stretched over these wooden bars, what we call stretcher bars. You want to make sure that when you look at your canvas that it's well made. There's no dents in the surface, no tears and things like that. If there are after you buy it, you can always return them and exchange. But you'll need 5 canvases or canvas boards in total. Again, you'll need to obtain at least 1 canvas by week 4, and that information will be closer that week and in your course syllabus. And then the canvas panels, it's actually cardboard that's wrapped with canvas. They do tend to warp. They're very economical, again, very cheap, cheaply made. So a lot of students, when they paint with these over time, they want to put it in a frame, and it's so warped, it really looks ugly. But again, if it's just for practice and you're doing whatever, you can use those, especially if cost is an issue. Just make sure that when you're looking at the canvases, that they are the correct size. So you'll need 2 18 by 24 inch canvases and then 3 16 by 20 canvases. If you want, you can get all of them 18 by 24. That's totally fine too if they have a package with that. But you'll need to have at least 3 with that 16 by 20 inch. And then your larger canvases, you cannot go smaller than that for those assignments.
Okay, so let's talk about paints. First off, with your studio course fees, I've purchased some supplies for you that you can pick up. So I've got your paint tubes ready for you to pick up over in the Office of Liberal Arts. It's in Building G on the first floor in Office G113. You can pick this up from the administrative assistant at the front desk. She can retrieve them for you and you'll be good to go. So I have your 2 reds, blues, and yellows for each student in the course. These are high quality artist paints and they're perfect for this course. No other colors are required except for that large tube of white paint and a regular size paint tube of black, which you'll hear me talk about later on. There are also some leftover canvas pads from the previous semester. So if you pick up your paints early on, you might be able to score a free canvas pad. So first come, first served on those. If you don't if you don't decide to use the paints that I have provided for you through the studio fees and you want to purchase your own, you can follow the rest of the video instructions on purchasing paints. I've included this as my normal video for all my painting classes. Just this semester, I was able to procure your actual paint colors for you, making it a lot easier. But if you do decide to obtain your own paints, please make sure you're not using the hobby or craft fluid paints, because when you need to create impasto on one of your future assignments, it's not really going to work that well and it's going to make your assignment impossible to do and quite possibly earn a 0 on that. So just make sure you arrange a time and try to pick up those paints from the front office and liberal arts. If you aren't able to do that, please let me know. Contact me, send me an email, and we can try to arrange something else. But definitely go pick those up because I've purchased those for you to save some time and some anguish in getting your paint supplies.
So you're going to use acrylic paints. You're not going to use these bottles like you see off to the right, no craft or fluid type paints. We really want something that has what we call a medium body to it, or a heavy body even. And so it's going to help us create impasto and very thick painterly strokes on the canvas, because that's what we want to see and that's what you're going to experiment with throughout the duration of the course. But for your basic paints here, what you're going to have, one large, and I can't express this enough, large white paint. A good example is titanium white. Make sure there's no glitter or no other items inside of that. It's just pure white paint. They'll have different names for some of their whites. Again, as long as it's just a nice large white tube, because you're going to use a lot of white throughout this class. If you can't find a large white tube, you can always buy another small white tube later on as the course goes through different projects. And then one black paint tube. Just some examples here: ivory black or Mars black. You may see lamp black, so on and so forth. But just make sure when you're looking at the paint tubes that they actually say that it's acrylic. I tell students that I prefer, just for starting off, the Liquitex Basics. That's a really good brand to use, especially if you're starting out. If you're a little bit more of a professional, there's other brands that I can recommend. And a lot of them, were through those online vendors that I showed earlier. Now, in terms of colors, you need to get 2 paint tubes of each color or hue. So what I want you to think of is one warm and one cool of that color. So one light and one dark. So I'll give you an example. Like for yellow, you're going to need 2 yellows, a light yellow and a dark yellow. Same thing for reds and same thing for blues. I've given you some examples of some paint tube names, and I'll talk about the example of temperature and all this later on here. But these are just some basic names. So if you see, like that lemon yellow and then you see yellow ochre, you can compare those and then you'll see the difference between the two. The one thing I do want to point out for your reds, watch out for some of them that you'll see like cadmium red medium. Some brands, they actually look more orange than it does red. So don't do that. Just make sure that when you look at it by itself, it should look red. As for your blues, I've given you really 2 examples here. If you can't find that Prussian blue, it's fine. You can use an ultramarine and then one of the other blues that look different. So the 2 colors of the same hue should look separate. Now, why are we using the 2 different colors? And this is what we call a double primary or a split primary system. So the reason for this is, all these colors you're going to look on the aisles. There's so many different types. So when you start to mix your colors, there's so many combinations and it gets overwhelming. And you start to wonder, okay, well, I need to make the best green or the best orange, so on and so forth. And how are you going to figure that out? Well, you start off with baby steps. And this is just using these 2 yellows. And you'll be using just those 2 yellows throughout the course, just those 2 reds and just those 2 blues. And you'll figure out the mixtures of the colors that they create all in between. And you'll learn in between, mixing, say, your cool red and your warm blue, that it gives you your intense best purple or violet. And then if we mix, say, my cool red and my cool blue, it'll actually make a dull color. And that's what we see on the outside here. And so I will teach you how to make the best colors out of those combinations. I know that kind of defeats the purpose of the magic of painting, but it's really a systematic and almost scientific process in teaching you this color plus this color makes this, and that's a good green, versus this color and this color makes this ugly looking green. And it'll help you kind of memorize these colors, mixtures, and temperatures. So when I was talking about temperature before, we really talk about warm and cool. So we think of warm colors as being aggressive. They appear to advance out towards us. Cool colors are very passive. They seem to recede. They kind of escape into the background. They don't really grab our attention. So when we're painting, we always want to think warm colors are going to be painted in the forefront, and then cool colors are in the back. So that's what's really going to help control depth in your painting. It can also help with, garnering, movement, emotions, and just basic attention, that focal point. So generally we see blue, green, and violet as cool colors, and then red, orange, and yellow as warm. So that's the basic generic idea of temperature. However, we're going to go with the color blue. Let's say we're going down that paint aisle, and we see all these blues, and we think of the lights and darks. That's nice, but we want to think of temperature, warm and cool. So if we just pulled out 2 different blues from that aisle, we can see that a single color can be warm or cool in relation to the other colors nearby. So if you have that warm blue next to a cool blue, you'll see the difference. One tends to jump out towards us more than the other. So when you go into that art store, or if you go to the art store and you look at those paint tubes, you can see the difference. Just grab 2 and see which one jumps out at you. Temperature is kind of a hard thing to comprehend in the very first beginning, part of the course. But after a while, you start to realize in those, warm and cool variations. Later on, you will be labeling your tubes with the black Sharpie, and I'll help you label, which one's warm and which one's cool. But these are just some examples of the generic paint names that we see and which categories they are generally in. However, depending on the brands, they may not look exactly the same in their temperature. But again, it's absolutely not necessary to buy these particular types as long as you get one light and that dark, or what we call the warm and cool. All right. So here's an example, and these are two different brands. So here we have the Liquitex Basics Cadmium Red Deep Hue, and then Masters Touch. This is just called Scarlet. So we see they're both acrylic. And again, prices, they may have changed from way back when I took the photo, but we can get an idea of which one is warmer, which one tends to jump out at us more than the other. Again, if you also think light and dark, that's okay to sort of initially think about, but later on you want to just think of warm and cool. This really happens when we place them side by side, and it really can help you figure out, which one's your warm, which one's your cool. However, there are some tricks in deciphering warm and cool yellows, and I will help you with that. Everybody gets it mixed. So again, we were talking about before that a color can appear warm in one place. So if we look at, a red, that's generally warm. But if we look at it compared to another red, oh, well, now that red is a cool red. So again, it's that relationship. So we think about blue. If we line it up with other blue paints, we can see differences such as a blue getting warm, leading towards violet. Like maybe it feels like it has a little bit of red in it. And then it's cooler with a bias towards green. Like maybe it had some yellow in that pigment. And so we can see that, side by side. So again, talking about yellows, we'll go in that aisle and we'll see these yellow paints. And then you're like, well, wait a second. Lemon yellow and yellow medium, they look exactly the same. So what are you going to do? I mean, they are the same, right? No. They're going to react completely differently when you mix them with another color. So if I mix it with a blue, the lemon yellow may make a really nice green. And then that yellow medium mixed with that same blue, that green isn't going to be as nice. So we will really find out what your colors do. And it's not like you have to find the best colors to make the best greens and things like that. It's just one light, one dark, or again, cool or warm. So to recap, large tube of white, small tube of black.
And the other colors you can pick up at the Office of Liberal Arts. If you decide to not use those paints and buy your own, you can follow the rest in this video.
We see two blues. We can see the differences here, which one's warm and cool. With our yellows, that warm and cool. And then the reds, the warm and cool. So two yellows, two reds, two blues, large white, and a regular size black. Optional items that you could purchase, you could get additional acrylic paint colors, and that'll generally be towards the end of the course, your last two projects. You could get additional acrylic paint brushes, different types, like these angled brushes in the top right, or even these micro brushes for really small details, but I refrain from that. You can definitely try it out. Different shape palette if you want for different purposes. It's all up to you. Sketchbook if you want to sketch out your images of what you want to create, since you will be posting ideas and things in the discussion boards. Maybe a toolbox or tackle box, a plastic one to hold and carry your supplies, or at least store them. Keep everything nice and organized. Painting clothes such as an apron or a smock, since you don't want to paint in maybe a school uniform or work employee uniform or any dress clothes. You will get paint on yourself. Trust me. I've gone through on days where it's like, oh, I got really nice clothes on. I'm gonna just paint a little bit. I'll be nice and safe. And then I end up getting paint somewhere on me, and it just drives me wild. I do keep a set of paint clothes. You know, with acrylics, they do wash out at first. If you let them dry, though, they can get caked on, and they can look something like this. But I always keep a set of clothes near my easel, kind of like Mr. Rogers, changing into a different outfit from when I begin painting, and I always keep them nice and clean, unless you want just an apron or a smock. If you're new to painting and you need a surface to paint on, you can get a regular folding, maybe metal tabletop easel, so you can see here, or you can get a full standing easel, which may be more expensive. And then other tabletop easels, some of them, they're very portable and they have drawers in them. You can pull them out and you can kind of store a majority of your paint supplies in there. Maybe not those large Liquitex Basics, but your brushes and other supplies. Just make sure that if you do get a tabletop easel like this one, that it can fit that 18 by 24 canvas, because you really want that on the easel nice and stable while you're painting. Later on, I'm going to try to do a video for framing a canvas, although it won't be required. Just my basic, style of framing with my artwork. One additional item that you may feel inclined to get are palette knives. There are metal and plastic. Either one is fine. You will find out that if you do sign up for Painting 2, palette knives are required. You'll actually create a painting in just using a palette knife and no brushes whatsoever. There are different shapes and styles. There's different reasons for palette knives, whether you're actually painting with them or mixing them on your palette, making marks, scraping them away from the canvas, so on and so forth. So that's the basic idea, the palette knife. It's up to you. Just remember, overall, with your colors, your paint brushes, those materials that you'll need by that second week, take a look at the course syllabus. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.